In case you missed it, here's a Sports Animal Rewind.
Let's talk college football. It's time for the Sports Page Summer of College Football, presented by Buddy Gregg RVs and Motorhomes, our daily preview of teams and conferences around the country for the upcoming college football season. Find Buddy Gregg RVs and Motorhomes on their Facebook page, their website at buddygregg.com, and follow them on Twitter at Buddy Gregg RVs. Now let's take a full conference look at the ACC.
And to help us with that, one of the best in the business, Fox Sports South TV play-by-play announcer, Atlanta Falcons play-by-play announcer, longtime Georgia Tech play-by-play announcer, great sports talk show host as well, super guy. I could keep going. We bring in Wes Durham for our ACC preview. Hey, Wes. Vince and Mike here in Knoxville. How you doing, Wes?
It's good to be with you guys. Thanks for having me on. Always fun to catch up.
Yep, definitely is. Sorry I didn't see you in Hoover for SEC Football Media Days.
The union labor meeting that is SEC Media Day?
Yeah. Did you identify the 20 people that had the nerve not to vote Jadeveon Clowney first team All-SEC?
You know what? I mean, I saw that. I was only there Tuesday and came back Wednesday before lunchtime, and by the time they released the SEC team, and I heard that 20 guys didn't vote Jadeveon Clowney. The first team, I'm like, that's credential revocation if I've ever heard of it. So good luck to those guys getting credentialed next year.
Wes, before we get into the conference, for people that haven't heard about any other conference media days, how drastic is the change from the SEC to the ACC?
Well, the best thing I can do to describe the SEC is the union labor meeting. And then the ACC event, and let me just put it to you this way, they credentialed 400 people this year, which is the most they've ever credentialed by like 125. And it's still 1/3 the attendance of the SEC credential policy, which I heard Mike and Vince, they denied about 200 people credentials to that this year. So, you know, you just use your own imagination, and the ACC becomes a cocktail party and an ice cream social and free beer, wine, and cocktails, and, you know, hey, we're going to talk about our football from time to time.
Yeah.
Whereas the SEC is, 3 days of intense focus. Who's going to ask the most controversial question? Who's not going to vote Clowney first team? You know, what is Danny Sheridan going to say about the Auburn investigation? I mean, you know, those are the kinds of things that just kind of happen in Hoover. Hoover is more of a news headline place. The ACC is more of a, hey, we're really trying to move up the ladder a little bit. We've got some good teams. We hope we can have some success. Look at these games we're going to play and, you know, kind of welcome Pitt and Syracuse this year into the fold.
Well, let's jump in visiting with Wes Durham, Fox Sports play-by-play announcer, and we'll get into that here in just 1 second. I want you to talk about your duties this year. But Clemson is the preseason favorite in the conference.
Sure.
How legit do you think of a favorite they are?
I think they're very legitimate, and I think with the way the schedule falls, they get the chance to make the early statement, obviously, on opening night against Georgia. You know, they get the mid-October game with Florida State at home. Then they play South Carolina at the end of the year. They do have a Thursday night game with Georgia Tech, a Thursday night game with NC State that in the ACC package kind of puts them on a national stage. But really it comes down to their ability to win the big game and, as my friend Reese Davis likes to say, not pull a Clemson along the way. You know, I think they've got tremendous offensive power. You look at Taj Boyd, obviously, in the year he had, and in particular the Chick-fil-A Bowl win against LSU. Sammy Watkins is incredible. Martavis Bryant, their other wide receivers, very good, and they've seemingly had a great tight end about the last decade. The thing that concerns me if I'm Clemson, and Brent Venables, as you guys know, came over from Oklahoma a year ago as their defensive coordinator. This will be his second year at Clemson, and they've got to be better because they can't get much worse kind of thing. They just played a lot of young guys a year ago. I do like their talent level. I like them in the secondary. But in that opening game, we're probably talking about a 48-45 situation because Georgia also has a lot of offensive firepower, but may have a little more defensive depth to counter what Clemson does. You know, a field goal will be essentially a win for a defense in that opening ballgame. But I do think, Vince, to answer your question, Clemson's got a chance to be a factor, particularly if they can hit those landmarks along the way during the season.
Hey, Wes, you speak of breaking news coming out of Hoover, And one of the nuggets this year was Steve Spurrier's revelation that the SEC coaches voted 14-0 to have Notre Dame become a full-time member of the ACC in football. I'm curious what the reaction was over in Greensboro, if any.
Not a lot of counter to what Coach Spurrier says, because everybody just kind of writes it off as, well, there goes Steve. I think the Notre Dame thing is a great deal for the ACC, Mike, in this respect, and that, the one thing that's kind of gotten glossed over in this is when that deal was signed last year, it's essentially a 15-year package, okay? But if Notre Dame between now and 2027 elects to join the league, by contract, they are bound to join the ACC.
Mm-hmm.
So, you got a 15-year chance if Notre Dame ever says, okay, we're going to go all in, they're going to go all in your league. Now, in terms of the football power, anything the ACC can do to kind of start, grabbing some land nationally with their football is important. Needless to say, obviously, what it's going to do to basketball, but Notre Dame is a great addition. But not many guys had any response for Coach Spurrier's statement, although I thought it was pretty clever when he said it last week.
Wes Durham from Fox Sports South, also the voice of the Atlanta Falcons, joining us for our ACC preview here on the new Sentinel Sports page. What do you think about the also very talented Florida State Seminoles?
Well, I think Florida State's in a really good situation too. They had their first 1,000-yard rusher a year ago since Warwick Dunn. Their first 1,000-yard receiver since Anquan Bolden when Rashad Green. I think Florida State's very good. The question again there is, where are they defensively? And I think they've got a chance there. Again, another team that's got some markers along the way, Vince, in terms of their schedule. But this could be Jimbo's most talented team. The problem with Florida State is, Jameis Winston is not a known commodity. Although, in listening to LaMarcus Joyner talk in Greensboro, the other day, I was impressed with what a veteran kid like Joyner said about Winston, in that he thinks Winston already comes to the table with a lot of the leadership capability that it takes to be successful in college football at quarterback. And I asked him yesterday, just in passing, I said, can you compare where he was to Manuel? And he said from a leadership capability, he thinks he's ahead of E.J. Manuel. Now, the thing about E.J. Manuel was he was such a tremendous athlete and such a big kid. I'm going to be curious to watch Florida State early, simply because I think there's so many little things that could mean the difference in them having a great season, and a great season being 12-1, 13-0 kind of deal, or them having a 9-3, 8-4 kind of year. But I think they've got some talent. And remember, they lost some first round talent. I mean, Bjorn Warner went to the draft. Manuel obviously went to the draft. They lost a handful of guys who could really, really play. But, let's keep an eye on Florida State. But for the time being, because of Clemson's firepower, they're the team I think that a lot of people are going to be focused on more out of the league.
And all those coaching changes on that staff as well. They had tremendous turnover. And then Jimbo Fisher continues to say that Jameis Winston, that it's a wide open competition. You don't buy that, right? Winston's the guy, right?
No, not at all. I think Winston's going to be the guy. In fact, you listen to the players talk, and it sounds like he is the guy. I mean, he is the guy, entrenched as the guy. But, then again, we've seen stranger things happen in August camp, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
Another school where some staff changes might make a difference. Virginia Tech was down the line last year in a lot of the offensive categories, especially passing. They bring in Scott Loeffler as offensive coordinator. What's the feel there about what to expect from the Hokies on offense this year?
Mike, the interesting part about Loeffler's arrival is, for those of us in Atlanta or in that kind of that SEC, ACC combination market, there are a lot more questions for guys like me or Tony Barnhart or guys who worked in this market because of his work at Auburn. He's a great unknown in the ACC. Now, I think he's done a pretty good job of getting acclimated at Virginia Tech and working with a longtime head coach and a guy like Frank Beamer. But, you look at Logan Thomas and what happened up there last year just doesn't make sense. But statistically, it's say what?
No, go ahead. We're listening.
It's one of those things where when you see what happened to Logan Thomas, to me it was predicated on their inability to run the ball. And now you're talking about a team whose returning rusher was kicked out of school. You really don't have any proven commodities at wide receiver. Your offensive line is pretty good. So now the pressure on Thomas is even going to be a little bit greater. Where Virginia Tech might be pretty good is on defense. But even then, there's still some unknowns there. So to me, this is a critical year for Frank Beamer. We've all seen this happen time and again, I guess, in college football with the longtime head coach who, gets a quarter century into the position, has built an unbelievable amount of tradition, credibility, and history with the place. And now all of a sudden it starts to wobble a little bit. Well, it wobbled a little bit last year, and if it wobbles a little bit more this year, it might not be very pretty in Blacksburg. I think the early start for them, I don't expect them to beat Alabama, but I would expect them to try and be extremely competitive with the Tide. And if they are competitive, that may give them enough boost to kind of push through. They play Georgia Tech in Atlanta on a Thursday night in late September, off a 5-day turnaround. And that could be a huge game in the early success of Virginia Tech.
How improved will Miami be? Because there's a lot of people talking about the Hurricanes and their rebuilding process.
Well, I'm one of those guys, Vince. I think I picked Miami to win the Coastal. I think Miami can win the whole thing in the ACC. Stephen Morris has been there 100 years. Seemingly, he took more snaps at Miami than Schuler took at Tennessee. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I see. When you look at Duke Johnson, they may have one of the best, if not the best, running back in the ACC. And then defensively, here's one of the things to keep in mind. They played in their starting 11 at the end of the year. They played 7 true freshmen, redshirt freshmen, true sophomores, or redshirt sophomores in that defense.
Wow.
So they have a lot of young experience. And Al Golden is the defensive coach, as you guys know. And they have been chomping at the bit for 2 years. Had they not taken the bowl sanction last year of their own volition, they would have gone to the ACC title game and had a chance to play Florida State for a chance to go to the Orange Bowl. Virtually that entire team comes back. And I think there's something to be said for the way the schedule sets up. They get all the big games at home, particularly in the division with Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech. I mean, it kind of really sets the table for Miami to be good and then potentially play Clemson and Charlotte for the ACC title.
Let me, instead of talking about the top, I want to ask a question about the bottom. David Cutcliffe's still a very popular guy here in Tennessee. Got Duke to a bowl game, barely last year, but he loses his quarterback. Do you think David is making any real headway, a foothold in making Duke relevant over there, or does this look like kind of back to the bottom?
Mike, I think he's done a really good job. I think Duke is probably more committed now to football than at any point since Spurrier departed. And you can wager whether that's enough or not, but I think Duke has done all the right things, and Kevin White, their athletic director, deserves a tremendous amount of credit for that. But I think David's been a perfect hire for Duke, and he's really done nice work. The problem is they lost a lot of veteran guys, as you mentioned, including Renfrey, the quarterback, who ironically was a 7th-round pick of the Falcons. The thing to me that I see about Duke is they've got to be able to establish some degree of continuity season to season. They were kind of on the upward tick for the last couple of years, got to the bowl game in Charlotte last season. Now, can they go back and kind of keep that upward climb going, or at least keep that continuity going? Fortunately for them, they play in a division that's a little bit down from the other side. Florida State and Clemson, obviously, in the Atlantic. That's also where Syracuse has been plugged in, who was obviously the co-winner of the Big East last year. On the coastal side, you've got kind of a scrabble with Miami, Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, and North Carolina. But right behind them, I would say, of Duke, Virginia, and Pittsburgh, there's no reason to think the Blue Devils can't be the 5th best team on that side. If they're the 5th best team on that side, then he, in my opinion, has kind of continued to build. Even though he may not get to a bowl, I still think he's done a really good job of establishing some degree of continuity. But this will be the challenge for them to see if they can kind of keep that upward tick or that momentum moving along for them.
Wes Durham from Fox Sports South joining us here for our ACC preview. Vince Ferrara, Wes Durham, and Mike Strange here with Wes Durham. Last couple things with you, Wes. Hit on your Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. I know it's going to be strange to see them for your perch this year after a long time being the voice of the Yellow Jackets.
Yeah, it's going to be different, but it was a unbelievable opportunity that the folks at Fox Sports Net and Raycom gave me, Vince. I mean, I was looking to do some television, not a lot of television, and some turned into a lot. So, but at this point in my career at 47 and an opportunity to kind of make this change, I feel very blessed and working with great people there, here in Atlanta with Fox and also with Raycom in Charlotte. And obviously a league I'm very familiar with, having done the radio here for the last 18 years. But Georgia Tech's in an interesting spot too. They got 4 Coastal Division games in a row after their opener on August the 31st. So they've got a chance though. They and Miami and Virginia Tech and North Carolina, as I said a moment ago, I think you can put them in a hat and draw one out, and that could as likely be the winner as anybody else. But it's a team that's it's got a lot of skill offensively and defensively. A lot of guys are back off a group that got a lot better in the second half of last year. So they're going to be fun to watch, and it will be different for me if we draw one of the Georgia Tech games later in the year. I don't have any in the first 3, but if I draw one later in the year, it'll be interesting to see how that is doing a ball game from a different box at Grant Field for sure.
And your Fox Sports South partner has been on this show before. We've previewed it. We've previewed UFC pay-per-views with Brian Stan before on the show.
He is amazing, and I'm excited to be working with him and Jen Hildreth. And Brian's one of those guys, Mike, you'll appreciate. Somebody said, why'd they hire you? I said, so nobody would jack around with me in the press box. I mean, you know, he's an American hero, first of all, for what he did in 2 deployments to Iraq as a member of the Marine Corps and a winner of the Silver Star in 2005. But you're right, Vince. I mean, you're talking about an MMA and a UFC guy who now is retired from that sport, thank goodness, so he won't be trying to, reenact anything in the booth on me. But he's one of those guys that I'm blessed to be working with. I've gotten to know him a little bit and really looking forward to spending the fall with him.
Just a quick word on the 2 new teams in the ACC this year. Your thoughts on them?
Well, I think Syracuse is probably a little more prepared than most. Scott Schaefer takes over when Doug Marrone took the Bills job. I think Scott was a perfect choice because he's the guy that really tooled up their defense. And he's a Midwest guy, and he kind of brings that approach to Syracuse. And I think, they've got to get through the departure of Ryan Nassib at quarterback. And he told me yesterday they got 3 guys they're really kind of working through. But I think Syracuse will be okay in principle. If they're willing to kind of say, okay, we understand Clemson and Florida State are all that, but their first conference game doesn't come until October when they play Clemson at home, and that'll be fascinating. Pittsburgh on the other side, Paul Christ has had so much movement. I don't know if you guys have followed some of this.
Mm-hmm.
The running back situation up there, with the kid going to Arizona State to play for the old coach and now coming back and just quitting football and all this, and they've had 2 or 3 other things coming around, but let me give you a name to keep in mind. The wide receiver he's got is Devin Street. And that kid's big time now. I mean, some of the folks I run with on Sunday tell me the Street kid could really be up the chart next April or May at the NFL draft. So I'll be interested to see how Pittsburgh handles this. They play Florida State on Labor Day night. Everybody up there, Steve Peterson, their athletic director, told me in Greensboro that the people there are just gunned up, might be the biggest crowd they've had at Heinz Field to watch a game. And I thought, well, that'll be good as long as they understand that, that crowd lining up wearing the spear on their helmet means business. So, but we'll see how it goes. I'm excited to have them. And then you guys know this. I mean, Louisville coming in the league next year with what Charlie Strong has done.
Mm-hmm.
And then Notre Dame starts their 5-game rotation in 2014. So, you need a roster to check the members of the ACC here in the next couple seasons.